Hello everybody, this is the British Bookworm. I'm Gavin and I'm going to review a book today that I've been reading for 4 or 5 weeks, and I've been desperate to finish this book to do a review for it because it's been so exciting to read it. I felt so many feelings and emotions while I've been reading the book, and it's been life changing, a life changing book for me. Someone as someone who's read thousands of books in my life, occasionally you'll find a book that you'll get involved and immersed in, which will have a profound impact on your sense of life, sense of reality, sense of identity, sense of self, sense of others. It'll basically shape your views and change your views to how you normally or have in the past seen the world. So this is definitely one of those books that I would recommend to anybody who's of like mind as me, who's seeking to be a better person, or who's pursuing the path of truth and seeking development and understanding and an awareness of the things that we know about, both whether it's in the human condition, in religion, in science, in fitness, in health, in any area that you personally find interesting. And so without further ado, the book I've read is The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. How Good People Turn Evil. Now, it's taken me 4 or 5 weeks to read this because I've been working, and it's been a slow read. It's a slow burner, but as soon as you open it, it's been a book that I'm thinking that you're going to enjoy. As soon as you open it, you get stuck in the first few chapters and you think, okay, this is going to be good. That's one of them. We're on a ride. But I was extremely grateful to get to the last chapter, where it's about positive human heroism. Human heroism, and when you read it, if you read it, and when you read it, or if you read it based on this review, you'll see what I mean. It's a very long and dark journey to the last chapter, where it throws a 180-degree turn on the angle of evil and human beings' evil nature. Now, I haven't written out again, and maybe that's a mistake I'm making on these book reviews. Give me some thought. You give me some of your thoughts on that if you're watching this video. But I just want to be natural, like I'm talking to you as a friend over a coffee table. So I'm going to give this book a 5 out of 5. I don't have any bullet points on it, and there's so much information in this book on human behaviour and how humans are easily led into evil actions. So Philip Zimbardo is famous for the prison Stanford experiment, where they got 24 normal young college university students out of interviewing 75 people for a 2-week job. From a 2-week job advert, they narrowed it down to 24 prisoners, 24 young lads who had been profiled. The 75 had been profiled, and they narrowed it down to 24 with 24. And then we profiled each person to make sure that there were no psychopathic traits, or they were all normal, average, moral abiding citizens from middle class families, and they were all white for that reason. Mostly white. There was a Asian man in that group. And they then, at the toss of a coin or through random choice, they basically selected 12 for being prisoners and 12 for being guards. And I'm sorry if you already know about this bit, but I'm just explaining the kind of thesis of the book. So basically, to sum it up, They put them in a simulated prison, which was in the cellar of the psychology department, which they built into a cellar. You can look all this information up on YouTube. There's loads of YouTube videos on this sociological scientific experiment. And in a week's time, they had to cancel the experiment because the prisoners were being abused badly by the guards, and the guards became more fitting to their role based on the loose description that they'd been briefed to behave in a certain way to control, without physical abuse, the prisoners. But they wanted to take away the free will or the privacy of the prisoners. Now, basically what happened was, they were shocked by how much these young lads from normal backgrounds changed over the first few days of being in an environment that was a very good simulation of a real prison. So the basic premise is the initial parts of this book discuss the prison Stanford experiment and the lessons that the psychological community took, and how what we can take as general human beings from the prison Stanford experiment. And then it goes into many other sociological or psychological experiments, which shows at the heart that when we judge people as a separate entity to their environment and situation, we are doing it at a cost to ourselves. So when people commit evil acts, we can't justify their actions, but we must also understand the causations of those actions. It could be institutional, situational, systemic, and trait-based even, dispositional. But at the same time, there's loads of complicated factors at work. Obviously, it touches upon, it goes into some points about the Holocaust and about other atrocities, but it discusses that ultimately you or I all have the capability of doing atrocious evil without even blinking, and thinking that evil action is just normal. The book is extremely in depth, and I had a feeling after waiting for weeks, I've been waiting for weeks and weeks to review it, and unfortunately, because it's so full of information, and I've literally just finished it today, I feel I can't do it justice. I can't explain, no matter how articulate I explain this to you. I think it's something you would have to read yourself and take away the lessons that the prison Stanford experiment had to our understanding of the manifestation of evil. It also went on to discuss the Abu Ghraib and how the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq and near Baghdad, and how when the Americans invaded Iraq in 2001, how the administration had set regulations and rules and institutional ideas that went down towards untrained men and women who ended up doing things that they would forever regret in their lives, but that it explains because of the the Stanford prison experiment that Philip Zimbardo is famous for. He was asked to contribute to the defense of one of the military police who's been prosecuted in the American military for inhumane acts against prisoners, and to bring into the equation the sociological science in defense of the MP. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't able to defend the MP or the 7 MPs that were basically thrown under the bus by the American administration. George Bush, Dick Cheney, the head of the CIA, and General Miller and others below them. They were basically thrown under the bus, as we could say in America, in Britain, where they threw them under the bus and made excuses that they were single atrocities committed by these 7 security guards or military police who were basically forced to become prison guards when they weren't prison guards, or weren't trained prison guards, they were military police, which is totally different. And it goes into the complexity of the situation. It's very hard to explain a book that's so complicated and in-depth on a YouTube video, but the book is a life-changing book, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. It's a book that will forever change your assessment and view of other human beings completely. You will never look at another person and solely criticize someone again without a deeper appreciation for the things that affect and change human beings' conduct. And it's been a prolific book for me to read, and I've really enjoyed, even though it's been a slow burner, it's been a slow read, it's really had an impact on me, I can't do the book justice, as I keep saying, but the kind of central theme behind it is the majority of society throw what they call dispositional psychology onto people who do evil actions without looking at systemic psychology attributes or effects that make people behave in certain ways. So it is a simple metaphor. If you get a white doll statue and you dip it in a dye, the white statue soldier, mini soldier, you dip it in a cup of dye, blue dye, purple dye, whatever dye, and pull it out, the soldier becomes the environment. The statue, the white statue, becomes the environment that you are dipping it in, which is the cup. Now, it's a very basic way of explaining what the book is saying. So, human beings can have good attributes and very, like the 7 MPs in Abu Ghraib prison were, I think the main majority of them were well respected, well rounded, experienced individuals who had decent backgrounds, who had no history of bad behaviour. When they were put in this prison with no oversight, officers were visiting the prison to check the conduct. They were told and encouraged by military intelligence to soften up the inmates for interrogations, and all these bits and pieces that fit into place through institution and regulations and administrative principles basically shape the behaviour of these 7 MPs. But the problem becomes that it wasn't the 7 MPs. In Iraq itself, it turns out that there were hundreds and hundreds of inmates, and all over prisoners of war were being massively abused by American and British soldiers, and that it became a norm because of the regulations that government set on taking out the Geneva Convention and the human rights and the way that human beings as prisoners should be treated, and treating them as non-combatants so that they are basically, Donald Rumsfeld and the American administration used their lawyers to find loopholes so that they could treat these people in a certain way, inhumanely, and they're war criminals. Now, you can justify the American administration for doing that based on the 9/11 incident, and I think if you know the show, the 24 Hours, where the agent had to stop a nuclear bomb going off in a city, and because the time was running out, he ended up having to do some really disgusting things in the series, and in order to try and torture and get the information about where the bomb might be. I'm saying this very loosely because it's a long time since I've watched the drama, the 24-hour drama. But basically, they use the same kind of justification in 9/11 that they might have a nuclear bomb next, so we have to torture these people, even though that it's well established. It's very well established that torturing people for information doesn't help in the slightest, and that you're more likely to get false stories and false information. And in the end, even though the American government try to claim that these policies like waterboarding help them find or get information out from these people, from these suspected terrorists or insurgents, they kept it classified. Any information on exactly what successful information they get out of torturing these individuals, they kept it classified. And it's well known, I think now, that nobody gained any information from these insurgents, who actually may not even been insurgents. That's what's the truly horrific thing about a lot of the prisoners in Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay. A lot of these people were basically randomly picked based on false evidence and finger pointing, and they went through horrific torture, dehumanization, which is a key phrase in the book, that you can only get a human being to behave in these atrocious ways to another human being when you basically dehumanize the other person, and you as a person don't feel like you will be held accountable on a moral level in the future, that you in the present moment are safe from any form of judgment. And once you have authority behind you pushing you and saying that no, we are asking you to do this for the betterment or for bettering our for our future goals and saving our country from terrorism, let's say, you create this straw man argument that's a moral straw man argument in order to get decent human beings treating other human beings totally inhumanely. And that's kind of like the basis of the book, and it has many arguments to support and back up what he's saying from other social experiments. And it's basically explaining that you cannot take out social psychology to standard psychiatrist psychology, where it's just basically looking at innate traits in a person, and that we're all impacted and affected by our environment. And there's nobody can state, no, you can't state that you will be a good person in an evil environment, and that you wouldn't be pushed into tempted to behave immorally if the conditions were right. On the contrary, the book discusses in numerous places that human beings are very weak to suggestion, and the more you think that you would not do a evil action from peer pressure or be impressed by authority figures above you or around you, the more likely you are to behave in that way. So as a book, I think it's the kind of book that once you've read and understood the message within this book, you basically will never look at yourself or the human beings in the same way. It's very profound and very disturbing, and it's not a matter of opinion. The book is written with the science that supports the science and the statistics that support the argument and the thesis that the author is making, and the social science experiments that have been numerous. Now, there are things that I do feel sort of challenged by, in the sense that I don't necessarily agree entirely about. For a start, he's not saying in this book that excuses evil actions. It's just saying that you have to understand the environment a person is in and how that can dramatically affect the transient human mind that can transform to its environment, because that is the nature of the organism that we are, that we change to our environment. And he's not justifying those evil actions. It's not excusiology, I think he uses the phrase, but it's understanding that you cannot put young people in an environment with regulations coming from the president and Dick Cheney that are coming down, that basically are opening up torture as a viable option and actually encouraging it, and it coming down a chain of command that's completely at fault and corrupt, and having no authority figures looking down upon the younger or less ranked or less experienced soldiers, and not see that it's a disaster waiting to happen. But not only that, highly trained soldiers in other parts of Iraq were basically set up into positions where they did inhumane acts based on the culture and all the dynamics at work, where you see Iraqis as ragheads or camel jockeys or whatever phrases they use, and you dehumanize them with words. And that's another thing I took from this book, was your language towards other people is extremely important, and it's related to something I'm working on myself at the moment, that the way we discuss and talk about people does matter. The way we describe other people does matter. If we respect each other and use nice language towards each other, even those people that are less deserving of it, we can literally help shape and mould the world in a more positive way. Somebody does something bad to you, rather than impulsively come out with cursing and swearing and derogatory statements, we can actually shape reality by not reacting in the way that everybody else would expect us to act like. So if we can understand the power of our language and how that behaviour that we conduct can shape the people around us, if we stand up as a moral ambassador to human conduct and heroism, if we try to understand that we have a moral duty to stand up against tyranny and against evil and against bad actions, and to even risk to a great extent without even reward, to take risk without even reward. That's something I really took out of this book, that if you think being a hero means that you're going to have publicity or that somehow you're going to benefit from being a hero, that's not true heroism. If it isn't heroism at all, it isn't heroism at all, no matter what you do. It's when you take some action and not expect anything in return, that's true heroism. And thank God for the last chapter, because it's a very dark journey. I'll finish with that really. It's a very dark journey. It's a very upsetting journey, but there's some positive light actually throughout the book. And it's making you aware, you the reader aware, that you have a moral duty to understand this, to understand these deep issues within the human psyche. And that is what I took from this book. We have to understand that evil does exist. And I think that's the thing that I'd kind of disagree with him about. I believe evil does exist. I believe as a Christian that there is a devil. But I do believe that those pieces that he talks about, that there are numerous dynamics interwoven into the fabrics of reality of every experience that literally shape how humans behave. And while I do believe that morally, and he's not saying that this isn't the case at all, but morally, every human being, in fact he argues for it, but because of the amount of evidence that puts that the amount of evidence that proves that the environment affects the moral baseline or behaviour of people is immense. But having said that, he still wants us to seek to be moral human beings, and it's not like justifying bad conduct based on an environment, which is what we do. It's part of the process of being evil. Other people do this to them over there, then we can do that. and we're all justifying this evil behaviour. So it's a truly and fantastic book that he wrote, or has written. It's got his life work and other psychologists' experiments written in, which are mind-blowing, and I can't do them justice to try and remember these experiments in detail, like the Milgram experiment, which you can look online. And the ultimate message is positive, because in the same way that the environment, such as those environments which were in Nazi Germany, that made decent human beings commit the most atrocious crimes against the Jewish race in the Holocaust, and not just that, but what Germans did to other Germans, and how, you know, whether they were Jewish Germans or not, it's just the whole interlaced reality of those times and experiences, and how it shapes and shifts human identity. Because as human beings, our identity is not fixed, it's not cement, it's not concrete. We are moulded and changed permanently every day by the environment that we're in. So on a positive way to end this book, because I know that I haven't gone into too much of the specifics about it, but I don't feel I can. I feel like you need to buy the book and read it. It gets a 5 out of 5. It's a life-changing book. It's a book that will open up part of your mind in appreciating that you cannot throw a large blanket of judgment on a person without understanding that there's far more intricate causes of evil actions, and that people's behaviour is affected by multiple plethora of realities that are at work all at the same time. But at the same time, you can use that understanding, and we could use that understanding about what causes human beings to do evil, to do good. And he discusses that on the last chapter, that understanding that the way, the things that trigger off gross evil actions that human beings fall for or fall into the trap of behaving. And that's not taking away that there are people, and as he says, you know, in numerous examples where people have done evil things and they've actually taken pride and pleasure in the atrocities and torture that they've done, and they've seen it as that they are skilled, or it's an attribute that they are doing this evil, and then they go home and show their wife and children love and are decent fathers or mothers after coming away from their workplace, which was for torture and pushing violence on other people who are totally vulnerable and trapped and powerless. But if we understand that the causes and the factors that are at work and at play that make human beings behave in that way, we can also affect society to behave in a better way by understanding positivities that we have, and create positive environments and positive institutions and systemic ideas and laws and regulations that make us better as a society, where we look at each person as an integral whole in society, give them a face, give them a voice, speak to them, listen to them, hear them, take on their views, and never ever take the face off a person, even if they are a bad person. Now, that is a challenging thing I just said, within regards to child abusers, within regards to paedophilia and rapists. And I would say, in all honesty, if someone touched my daughter, that, you know, I don't need to go there, do I? But the fact is that we have to have an awareness of those factors, that we have to be aware that we've got to see people who are in prison as human beings. In a lot of cases, people in prison, you know, they aren't there for the reasons that we imagine them there for. But we are easily able to go and drive past the prison and just assume, oh, they're prisoners, yeah. And we just basically dehumanise the faces of those inmates with, yeah, they're just prisoners. And we'll be like, well, they deserve to be in there. They're in there. They've done something wrong. And we don't then understand and identify the numerous incountable factors that may have been at play for that person to make bad choices that ends with them ending up in prison. That's not justifying paedophilia or rape or bank robberies or armed violence. It's not justifying it, but it's not making, definitely not in any sense, I've got to say this, just my own desire within my video, paedophilia and rape, I cannot in any shape or form give any justification in my heart with that, and I wouldn't. With rape in war zones, unfortunately, it's a factor of human history, which is another conversation which fits into this subject. But it's the way human beings make this kind of unwritten contract that if one man rapes a woman, another man will do it, and then they all do it as part of like their kind of expression of barbarity as survivors of a battle, or trying to find a justification in it. It's not about trying to find justification in the action of that incident. I'm trying to get that across, but it's understanding that there's attributes, not attributes, that's the wrong word, not attributes. There's things that are causing those behaviours that we must take into account, as well as the fact that they are evil pieces of shit for doing it. And that's kind of where I'm going. I feel like I lost myself a bit there, but it's a life-changing book, basically, and I feel like I wish everyone was taught this as a child. You know, like softly some of the factors in it. You know, it's like where we say don't bully each other at school, don't call each other names. If we call each other names, it sets up. And it touches upon that in the book, that evil is done incrementally. Putting a foot through the door, then 2 feet through the door, and then the whole body through the door. You can't just get in through the door, you have to do it slowly. And that's kind of the thesis as well behind the book, that people become evil incrementally. Again, going back to me, I'm very, as a person, in a historical sense, I'm very judgmental about criminals and people in prison. For a large number of those people in them prisons, I think like they've made decisions and calculated and taken risks that they thought were potentially able to get away with, like dealing drugs or beating their wives up or whatever it would have been. They, at that moment in time, thought they were going to get away with it, and then now they're there rightfully so. They're in that situation. They're in a cell. They're being punished for their crime, and in some ways, punishment for a crime doesn't ever work, because the victims are always going to be traumatized and hurt by that rape or child abuse. Now, I've gone off a tangent, but it's all relevant. But the point is that a lot of people that do bad things have been affected by multifaceted angles and that causes them to fall into the trap of evil. And while I'm this last section of me doing this video, I feel like I'm failing to explain this man's work, really, which is exceptional, and the thesis of social science about the subject. Ultimately, we can, to change the subject, ultimately understanding that there are pressures at work external of our own moral consciousness, we must understand that we to ourselves can do evil actions, and that under the same pressures we can also do heroic acts. And as human beings, we must understand that we can be evil, and that when we're in environments that are pressing us in a way which we feel is immoral and that we will not be able to live with from the future looking back, that we didn't act appropriately and we will regret it for the rest of our lives, then we know that we must make a stand, that we must become the hero, even if it affects us, even if we die. We must stand up for what is right. So I'm going to leave it at that because it's going to become a very long video. You can look up the Stanford Prison Experiment on YouTube. You can also look up the Abu Ghraib story online, and you can also look up a lot of the stories like the Milgram experiment in this book. It's very easy to get very disheartened and go down a very dark rabbit hole when you see and learn and understand the actual facts of science that proves that human beings can fall into atrocious behaviour in a very short space of time. But I think that going down that dark rabbit hole is really worth it, because if you don't, you're always never going to be enlightened to the other side of the equation. And also, you're protecting yourself if you always say, I know that I have in me the potential to do grotesque evil. And to finish off, even though it might sound like a negative, it's not, because it makes you far more likely to make a moral and heroic stand by knowing it. You watching this and me preaching this book now, we all have the potential to do atrocious evils on other human beings. We all potentially have the ability to be guards of Auschwitz, or be pushing Jews into gas chambers, to be crucifying Jesus on the cross, to be doing atrocious crimes that are unimaginable in the modern Western civil world that we live in. Just knowing that, as depressing as it is, makes us all able to be more humane, more connected as a sovereign, sentient being with each other, and appreciating the vulnerability of not only of our lives through the persecutions and evil conducts of the rest of the world's potentials, but also that knowing that allows us to be warriors on a humane path, and that this is the war, this is the battle. Appreciating the battlefield and all the troughs and trenches and obstacles to being a good human being allows you to become a warrior of and pursuit of good conduct and behaviour. So I'm going to leave you with that. Hopefully this book review hasn't been too much me preaching and talking a lot to you. But basically, it's a summarization of a very profound, life-changing book. It's a 5 out of 5. Look up the factual things I've just stated in the book on YouTube. The Abu Ghraib prison, the Stanford experiment, the Milgram experiment, among others, and they are mind-blowing, and it really makes you feel humble. It makes you feel really humble. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to conclude it now. Thank you for watching The British Bookworm. I'm Gavin, and I hope that you feel inspired to buy a copy of The Lucifer Effect, How Good People Turn Evil. Yeah, intense. And I just hope, if you've read it, let me know what you think. Or if you know about what I've just discussed, let me know what you think down below. Give us a like, subscribe. I hate when people say that on YouTube. That's it. Hopefully you've taken something from this video. If you don't read the book, you've got some idea about what it's about. And that's my video. Just be good to each other. See you later.